and regale us with her presentation.
Thank you, council members, council president. Josh Johnson and I will be doing this presentation together. We are going to be talking about economic development incentives for housing. This is kind of a continuation. We started discussing some of the different things with the economic vitality presentation back in January, and at that time we said we were going to come back and really look at some of the incentives for housing and what does that look like. And during this time period, we've also continued to get feedback from developers and builders and the community on what some of those needs are. And one of the things that we wanted to really start with is that we're looking at all different types of housing, whether it be market rate, affordable units. We know that there's a need for units across the board. It's not looking at just either or, it's looking at all of them. Increasing the supply of housing is going to help across the board, and really looking at the different types that are available and how do we really help drive that as we kind of continue moving forward. So really we want to focus on all types of housing and just really increasing the overall supply of housing units within Rochester. We know that there are shortfalls. We've had this slide when we were talking about economic vitality, and there's the need for 5,628 market for sale homes by 2030, that our current production rates are not meeting that demand, and that we're estimated to need 964 sale homes, because that came from the Rochester Area Housing Financial and Policy Tool Forecasting Analysis that was done last year, and that's where that 960 came from. Generally, our goal is approximately 500 units a year, and we've only been around the 200, 250, so that's where that 950 comes from. There's a demand for multifamily housing units in the downtown of about 3,000 units, and there's demand for senior housing. So across the board, we're seeing that there is a need for housing units and how we best kind of move that forward. When we're looking at existing financial tools, we use our community development block grant funding for where we can in terms of supporting housing initiatives. We have tax increment financing, which we're going to talk a bit more about today. Our state-led hazard remediation program, our ADU pilot program, 4D, and our city parcel disposition. All of these are tools that we have existing that kind of help contribute to overall housing. And really, what does that look like? And one of the ones we are going to be adding to it is economic vitality will be another tool. Obviously, later this year when the sales tax starts collecting for that, but we will add to this. The other key component is really the regulatory tools that we have available, and this really sets that first things that we need to address and really helps all of these pull together, and all of these work together in terms of our comprehensive plan and setting that larger vision for the city of Rochester, and then really using the tool, which is the Unified Development Code, to how do we implement that comprehensive plan moving forward. And then the sanitary sewer master plan of like where we're seeing this growth and how we need to have those infrastructure improvements going forward, and how does that get incorporated with the other documents that we have. And then our other maps and policies in terms of our growth management map and our land use map, and all of those really help guide discussions in terms of development, where we're going to see growth and where those needs to be managed going forward. So what are the policy considerations that before you today that we're looking for some feedback on tools to support the creation of single family and multifamily housing units. We really want to create this environment to support the development of housing units within Rochester. And that's really what we're looking to do. And also we're looking at how do we layer these tools and how do we pull these together to successfully help drive additional housing units. So some of the conditions and challenges that we're seeing for residential development, I think these are pretty well known across the board, but we're seeing dramatic rise in borrowing costs due to interest rates, the rise in construction costs post-COVID. Operating costs are also rising, trying to find willing developers who are interested in doing development, managing funding requirements that are, what are the requirements depending on the funding source that need to be included in that project, and what does that do to the overall project numbers? And then being able to finance projects and looking at how those other factors all come together, which makes for some challenging for builders and developers to really put this forward in terms of building additional units and entering the market right now. What we're seeing, and wanted to provide an example, is if we had a project that started construction in May of 22, and what it would happen if that started today, and what you see is an increase in the gap of that project of over $2.45 million. So you're seeing an increase in the per unit that would need to be, and how that developer, if this project was there and ready to go, and had it delayed a little bit based on all these other factors. This is where we're seeing the costs go up in terms of borrowing costs, the interest rates, and all of those other factors in terms of producing these types of projects. So we're really wanting to give you that example, and you can kind of see where that goes in terms of where our current TIF policy is and where we're seeing those borrowing construction costs. And overall, like where does that lie where we are right now? And so with all of this information, we kind of have a little bit of a two paths going forward. We either kind of wait for the market to shift, or we start creating some flexibility and start looking at what we have in terms of policies and tools to help support and grow housing. And so really what we're looking to do is what changes can we make to kind of continue to push housing and make that a priority? Because we think waiting for the market isn't going to be the best solution for Rochester, knowing all the growth that's going to be coming forward. So in terms of what we've done recently with regulatory tools, and this is just something that we wanted to a little bit highlight, is with the updated UDC, we reduced minimum lot size, we diversified the housing types across the citywide. We kind of created a predictable process so that when somebody's coming in, it's very easy to see what that process is and how they move forward through it. We've also done a lot of process improvements internally to make sure that we are tracking review times and being able to share that information so that people know when those things are going to come forward. We've updated technology when we need to, and also really focused on meeting with people up front, trying to get them the information through pre-development and also our weekly development review committee of getting feedback to people early so that they kind of know what there might be going on with that project. And
Thanks, Ree. I'm going to talk about some of our more commonly used development assistance tools. Before that, just want to talk a little bit about the benefits of economic density and housing development. So one of the things that I know is kind of a scary word, can be a scary word, is the word density. I really don't want it to mean like 18-story housing complexes. This really means just more units per acre than maybe your typical greenfield single-family development. The other thing is we think about density being downtown. Of course, that's our highest density populated area, but it can be outside of downtown as well. You think about our development of West Transit Village, other transit-oriented development sites. But some of the benefits to density is clustering around other property types like retail, neighborhood services, other commercial uses. So these are just some of the other examples of the benefits of density. So walkability, it's been proven that people experience emotional and physical health the more they walk. It also reduces the reliance on single occupied vehicles or vehicles in general. And that sort of leads us to transit opportunities. So the more densely populated an area, the more transit opportunities are often available. It also helps us direct where our future transit investments are going to be in the more denser areas. It also supports sustainability. That can be counterintuitive, but a lot of times these are infill sites. You can design projects that have green roofs. They have sustainable heating and cooling systems. They can even connect to future district energy systems. Local economic impact, of course, density equals more rooftops per se, more people living under one roof. So retail falls rooftops, that spurs economic development. A lot of retail businesses and other commercial businesses will look at walk sheds, where our employee and customer base can be walking to and from. Efficient land use, as I mentioned, a lot of times these are infill sites. So we typically already have streets, we have sewers, we have water right in front of the project already. So we're not extending our capacity or extending our infrastructure. And then better use of city resources, that's more of the same, actually reverse those. So efficient land use is more about having more bang for your buck, more yield per acre because you've got more housing, more value, which increases sales tax, property tax, and those types of things. Better use of resources is really the benefit of having the infrastructure already there. And then there's the development impacts, the different phases of going through development. So statistic that downtown residents are likely to spend 7 times more in 1 year in downtown neighborhoods than a downtown employee. So we often think about, attracting visitors, which is important, but creating that critical mass of people that live in denser populated areas is also very, very important. Some of the future regulatory tools that we're looking at is pre-reviewed ADU plans, and being specific there. So pre-reviewed is different than pre-approved. So pre-reviewed, we're working with the Coalition for Rochester Area Housing as an ADU pilot program where we have pre-reviewed plans that we can actually present or to provide to people that are interested in developing ADUs, and that really creates an opportunity to get people off the ground and running a little bit. There's a little bit of local mom and pops might not know like how to develop an ADU, right? So this just gives them an opportunity to have a plan in place that's pre-reviewed. It saves time. We estimate that it's about $6,000 to $10,000 in design fees by having those plans already available. The other thing I would mention is it's not a development assistance tool that we often think about, but one of the biggest impacts that we can give to any developer, not just ADUs, but in general, is the benefit of time. So the more expedited we can make our review processes, the more transparent we can make those processes, the more time it saves. And time does equal money when you're talking about developers investing in the city of Rochester. Once we test this pilot program, we'll also look at expanding the pre-approved housing plans to duplexes and small apartment buildings to see how that works with our permit review team. Now we're going to go into just some of the financial tools that are most commonly used to incentivize housing. So this is just a comparison of abatement versus TIF. So the one thing that I want to note is through a lot of these incentives that we're looking at, we're really looking at a layered approach. How do we layer the different funding strategies to get the most bang for our buck? In this case, TIF and tax abatement cannot coexist. It's either one or the other. You can't have a TIF district and an abatement district that overlap. So just going through some of the differences, what is this? So TIF allows financing based on the future tax increment. Taxpayers still pay the full tax amount and then get reimbursed and agreed upon percentage of the increment that's generated. And I'll go into that a little bit more deeply. Tax abatement is taking the local taxing jurisdiction's percentage of the property taxes and then either providing that to the owner for economic or public benefit and public improvements, or the city can retain that for public infrastructure and public improvements. So it's either 100% or something less than that. The term limit for TIF is 25 years. It actually ends up being more like 26 years because you can not capture the first year, which adds another year, but statutorily it shows 25 years. Tax abatement, it's typically 15 years, so the city can choose to create a 15-year tax abatement. If the city has the county and the school district also vote and wants to be a part of the abatement, it can extend out to 20 years. The incentive amount for TIF is based on the increment that's generated, and there's a slide that will show that in a little bit more detail. And there's typically much higher financial incentive potential with TIF than in abatement. The annual value of abatement can exceed 10% of the political subdivision's net tax capacity. So there is a limit when we're looking at how much abatement goes out, and that includes abatement bonds as well. That's still a very, very large number because we have a very, very large net tax capacity, and we're currently not even close to that. The pros of TIF, so TIF requires approval by only one municipality, so the city can collect all of the increment generated from a project, both county, school district, and city taxes. For TIF, regulations and increments for abatement are a lot less onerous than TIF, so the funding that you receive from the abatement is much more flexible in terms of how you use it. The cons to TIF are they're subject to more legal restrictions. There's the blight test, there's the but-for findings and stricter limits where that money can be spent. And then abatement, as I mentioned, just requires each taxing district's approval, depending on how much you want to capture and the year amount that you want to extend it to. So on the left-hand side, this is a lot of what I just said. So the 2023 net tax capacity is 195 million. So if we can only capture 10% of that, it's still a large portion. One of the strategies that we're looking at is what does abatement look like for a single-family home? So if we were to take a single-family home over a 3-year period and we were to provide the benefit or the abatement generated off that over 3 years, it could be to go towards the increase in taxes once a family moves in, or it could be to help assist with the down payment for a home. So for the down payment portion, you need to have another fund to sort of front load that and then replenish it over the 3 years in order to give them an upfront benefit.
That we wanted to kind of talk about is the 41, the property tax classification rate. There have been some changes to this program where the tax classification rates changed from 0.75% to 0.25%, which is pretty significant when looking at some of these. And a lot of these were done in the 2023 legislative session. The property tax savings has to be used for either property maintenance, property security, improvements to the property, rent stabilization, or increases to the property's reserve account. So they have those savings. They are only for the designated unit. So if you had a mixed